Ladies and gentlemen.
Hyvää huomenta.
Buenos días.
Kalimera.
Hello everyone.
Bonjour. Dzień dobry.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning and hello everybody.
Good morning everyone. We are very glad to be here today with you.
It is a great pleasure for us to be here representing Italy and celebrating the 16th anniversary of the Treaties of Rome.
As we saw with Brexit, I am convinced that the EU has to evolve to survive. In line with the motto, "Together we can make a change," I think that our different visions could help the deputies to better understand the preoccupation of the people. Enjoy your day. We are lucky to be here and to be European.
As Josip Pupačić, a Croatian poet, once said, I ja sam ova zemlja, ovaj narod, ovaj grad. Čovjek je neiseljiv kao i zemlja I ne može se rastati od sebe.
In other words, for I am this land, these people, this town. A human being is not evictable. A human being cannot depart from itself. We are this land, we are these people. Let's make our better future together.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and it's a great privilege to speak to you all here from Brussels in the European Parliament. But of course, the actual Parliament that you're sitting in right now is the home of the European Parliament in Strasbourg, so it's great to see you there. I'm an Irish MEP, and I also understand that there's a school from my own constituency in Dublin, and I'd like to welcome them to the European Parliament especially, and it's great to see so many people there. It's a great privilege to represent the people of Ireland in the European Parliament. We are a very small country, and we're one of a family of countries that really appreciates the fact that we are in the European Union.
And like lots of people, I was absolutely devastated at the decision to leave the EU. And I was wondering, as a young person in the UK, what can we do to remain connected and in solidarity with the EU?
Well, Sadie, thank you very much for your remarks. And I think you have articulated what I hear from so many of my friends in the UK. A deep sense of frustration at what's happened, a deep sense of disconnection about what has happened. Can I tell you a story that left a big impression on me? A week after the decision on Brexit, about 50 pro-European MEPs met Wolfgang Schäuble, who is the finance minister in Germany. And he met us privately, but he left an indelible mark on the meeting. We were asking his response to Brexit, and he said when he was watching it on BBC that night at home, he said he cried because of what had happened, because of the importance of the UK as a European partner, and the importance of what Britain has done over the years in defending democracy, in standing up to tyranny and fascism in the 1930s and 40s, and giving so many of a fallen generation who had given their lives for freedom in Europe. And that historical connection between Europe and Britain, which is so real, all you have to do is to visit in Flanders some of the graveyards to see the ultimate sacrifice that the British Army and its allies made towards freedom and democracy in Europe. And Schäuble said that he was absolutely heartbroken at the decision, as we all are. And what can you do now? I mean, it is a matter entirely for the British people. Even whether you're in the European Union or not, and soon to leave, we have got to keep talking, and we've got to keep connections, and we've got to make sure, in my view, that Britain aren't punished for this. Because Britain may decide into the future, if things turn out badly, to look at this decision again, and the opportunity has to be there for Britain to do that, in my view. But that is a matter entirely for the British people. But Britain and the English people, the Scottish people, the Welsh people, the Irish people, whatever part of Ireland you're in, we're all Europeans. Nothing will stop English people from being, or British people from being Europeans. There's a common European identity. And our task is to make a strong European Union. A strong European Union that reaches out across boundaries and unites people. And we have to work hard at that day in, day out to make sure that argument is made. and hopefully at some time in the future, Britain might look again at the question of membership of the European Union. I very much hope it will.
I have a question regarding fiscal laws. You said Europe needs to be competitive, yet many countries are not economically stable. Some come to mind here. Why has the Parliament not yet made use of a temporary solution or something so countries could adapt similar tax levels just to be economically stable?
Well, that's a really good question, Wolf, and I appreciate that. I think Parliament has done a lot, actually. It's not fair to say that Parliament has not been active in this area. All of the architecture of banking union, of economic surveillance, of the six-pack, the two-pack, the country surveillance, and the semester, all of that is monitored here in Parliament. This morning, in Parliament, I was able to question Danielle Noya, who is head of what's called the Single Supervisory Mechanism. It looks after banks to make sure that they have enough capital in them if they ever go bang, so that people aren't actually, the taxpayer isn't on the hook again as they were 10 years ago. And we play that role in supervising what is going on to make sure that the regulatory environment is right. But people have to live within their means. Our debt and deficit in Europe was too great. We were spending money that was not our money. I come from a country that went through an enormous financial shock, where in 1 year, the tax base was reduced by over a third. And had we not got solidarity from our brothers and sisters in the European Union, we would have not been able to come through that. Portugal went through a very difficult phase. Spain went through a very difficult phase. Cyprus went through a difficult phase. Greece is going through a difficult phase, but I'm confident we can get Greece to a better place. So the role of the Parliament is to supervise all of that and to give some democratic accountability of the decisions that are taken by Eurogroup, by ECOFIN and by the IMF ultimately as part of a financial package. Is tax part of the solution? Yes. I personally believe that member states have the right to set tax rates. And this is a controversial issue. Not everyone in my own group would agree with me on that. There is a view towards harmonising corporate tax in Europe. But I think if we're going to remain competitive and strong on a European level, we need to be able to have the power at a member state level to set tax rates and determine taxation policy. It's not just good for those member states, it's good especially for Europe, because if we don't have that, we could lose out to other parts of the world. So I'm not in favour of tax harmonisation, but I'm aware that some colleagues are, and that debate is ongoing.
A majority of us earlier today just answered a survey that said we weren't very well informed on the business of the EU and, well, what it was about, especially in schools. And I was wondering maybe if you believe that perhaps we are not being as well informed as we should be and not enough effort is being put into sharing what is happening in our, to our countries and their populations.
Well, I think it is so important that people know what's going on. Information is power. Information is control. And too often we depend on journalists and the media to explain the work of the Parliament, to explain the work of the Commission, to explain the work of the Council. And not enough of that explaining is done in a way that informs citizens. Frequently, it's a biased presentation of the facts. So in other words, if something good happens, it's all down to the member state government and the politicians in our member states. If something bad happens, it's all those faceless bureaucrats in Commission in Brussels. And we have allowed that debate to become this kind of us and them, the Brussels elite against everyone else. And it's a very dangerous debate, and I think it needs to be challenged. The only way it can be challenged is by information, as you rightly say. Now, we've a task to communicate what we do, the good bits and the bad bits. We've a challenge to go directly to our citizens and explain to them what's happening here in Brussels, because it affects their lives. I'll give you an example. Today at my Economic Affairs Committee of our our Parliament, the Econ Committee, I made the point that 70% of all financial law in the European Union now is derived as a consequence of a co-decision making between the European Parliament and the European Council. So that's likely to increase, if anything, over the coming years if we're going to get a more integrated Europe. So we need to explain to citizens what's happening. But to do that, it's crucial that the media play its role too, rather than presenting it as a kind of an us and them. Because I've been a politician in my own country and here, and I have to say that the European Commission is very open in explaining things and being accessible and explaining rights, EU rights, to Irish citizens in a way that the Irish government can't explain them. So we have a huge job to communicate that, and I think for a younger generation, for you guys especially, to go back to your countries and explain to your member states your rights as EU citizens. I'm fundamentally committed to that idea, that I like the idea of having dual rights, of being Belgian or Irish and French or German, while also being European. I like that. I think that is the idea that I think European citizens do understand. It's something that the politicians are very bad at explaining, but it's something that I think people do understand and appreciate if we get the communication right. And if there's just one advice I might give you, it's this: to not take for granted the freedoms we have, to really recognize that a previous generation fought hard for the peace and the security and the freedoms we all have. Those freedoms are there between men and women, between people of different sexual orientation, between those who have much economically and those who have little. And the European Union is really around the fundamental belief in freedom. And if we can continue to focus on that, the imbalances, the inequity, the injustice of life where we live, because it's not a perfect world by any measure or means, we can continue to make progress for your children into the future. None of you think right now that you're going to become parents into the future, but you all will. And your task is to make sure that those kids, your kids in the future, have the same opportunities, the same rights that you'll have, I hope, in the course of your life. And I just want to wish you every success, every luck in your own member states, and thank you indeed for the opportunity today.
We want to reduce plastic bag use and also change up the way we package things. So instead of using 3 wraps of plastic, we try to use 1. We also would like to use biodegradable plastics, so we don't have too much of an impact on the environment. With recycling, we can also, help out this problem by reusing everything again. Educational-wise, we would really like to make sure every student gets to know what's going on in the world of environment. So from elementary schools till middle schools, till universities, colleges, everyone needs to know there's a problem and we need to solve it. We can solve this problem. And if money is a problem, I've got a question for you. How much is a life worth? How much is your life worth? Think about that for a second, please. What we would like to do is introduce a doomsday project in which one day, every year, for example, we don't have clean water. This is only for adults and young adolescents like us, so we can learn what happens to the world when we don't stop destroying it.
I was just wondering if you discussed anything about the meat industry and the agriculture, because that is a big problem and I don't think it's discussed enough.
There is a big problem, yes. As Europeans, we eat way too much meat, including, for example, beef. Beef is very damaging for the environment, and also what is a very important project, a sustainable project. People can buy animals now. They can invest some money in an animal that is raised on a good farm, a biological farm. and eventually when this animal's old enough, they can have it slaughtered. But these people invest in this animal, they give it a name, they know where their meat comes from. It's not like I buy some meat in the supermarket and I just buy it and I don't know where it comes from. There's a problem, but I think with using the awareness we create with the Doomsday Project and other projects for primary schools, elementary schools, and we can, if the younger generation, the people after us, if they know there's a problem, if we can make that clear to them, they will also start using different sources instead of meat.
Because on the one hand, we see that human rights play an essential role in our societies, because these are basically the pillars of our societies that we have built them on. And these should not be restricted under any circumstance. However, on the other hand, we felt that in some cases, we should prioritize security. And we have agreed that it is the state's duty and capability to discuss whether the state would like to limit these fundamental human rights. Because there is a social contract between statement and the state. And the state is responsible for protecting its citizens. And whenever the state feels that such measure should be taken in order to execute his duties and fulfill his duties, then yes, these human rights should be limited. However, we have some additions to these points, because we believe that there is a collection of rights that should not be violated, nor limited, nor restricted under any circumstance.
At first, a major point we think is supporting the countries and economics within the EU to be stable. That's one of the main priorities. But when we're talking about development aid, we're going to talk about the countries outside the EU. After a natural disaster, of course, every country gets our emergency aid, blankets, foods, water, everything. But we have to rebuild. We have to help rebuild those countries. We have to build third world countries. We've developed a plan for that. We want to start by developing their agricultures and developing their industries. We want help from our specialists within the EU to go out there and to help them. We value and want to motivate every specialist, like from medics to teachers, to go volunteering in one of sort third world country. And next to helping rebuilding those agricultures and industries, they can educate the people, educate about their specialties, so they become specialists themselves, and educate them about rights, their human rights, sexual rights, democratic rights. And the specialists can motivate also the local population to be more active, to be like them. By educating the local population of their rights, we also want to fight corruption. Corruption is a big problem when we're talking about development aid, because every country doesn't want to spend their money about the bigger houses for the local politicians. We want to give our money to the population.
Being responsible for thinking about Europe's future, we couldn't help but to think about ours as well. We strongly believe that creating a bright future for Europe is in our hands, and it depends on whether we can be heard or not. Apart from a few exceptions, most of us, the youth, are not allowed to vote just yet. But still, there are numerous issues that affect our everyday life, such as education, traveling, or job applications, and we can't have a say in those. That's why we came up with the idea of creating a European Youth Parliament. Each country's own domestic youth parliament would send delegates to the youth parliament, and the conclusion the delegates come to would be forwarded to the European Parliament itself. Therefore, we could express our thoughts without having the right to vote. Also, our group found that it gives a hard time for students to apply to foreign universities because of the diversity of our school systems. This is the reason why we think that the EU should work out a united school transcript system, or at least regulate criteria in universities. We also found that the EU citizens lack information about the working method of the Union. In order to improve this, we thought about creating a communicational system in the EU to inform citizens and make EU elections more understood and significant. Thank you.
We have a very similar system in the UK. We have MYPs, which is Members of Youth Parliament. However, my question is for you, how can you guarantee that our voice is actually going to be heard and we're actually going to be considered? Because in the UK, I don't think it works as well as you're proposing it's going to. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I feel like if we forward our thoughts to the European Parliament, they might consider it. But one thing is sure, that since we do not have the right to participate in politics, we can't do anything else but to express our opinions, but we can't force anyone to make laws that we want to be made. So, no, of course, I cannot guarantee that what the European Youth Parliament discusses will become a law, and it will affect you, and it will make your life as a student or as a young person better. But all I can say is that with this concept, at least we have the chance to make this happen. Without this, we do not.
Education should be used as a weapon to minimize discrimination through media, through a potential media platform that should be created by the European Union, so as to educate everyone for each culture, for migrants' cultures, and also for European cultures. Also, communication between member states in order to identify sectors and businesses that have high demand and allocate groups of immigrants there would be a very useful technique in order to make a more efficient system. And that would also be useful if it occurred between language institutions in order for them to acquire the fluency to speak in English and then be able to apply their skills in the sector they are needed. Now, concerning integration in the community as a whole, we recommend that member states adopt similar schemes to what Amsterdam has been doing, where residences are mobile dwellings and residents are half of them are students and the other half of them are refugees. And basically what they do is they live together in harmony because they have the incentive of cheap housing and they work together to live harmoniously, as I said, and they are encouraged to participate in activities together, not only because they have the chance to strengthen their resumes, but because we all want to have a stable European Union.
I wanted to know how is the migrant crisis affecting ordinary citizens?
Certainly, ordinary citizens have had a shock with the migrant crisis because not because they want to attack migrants necessarily, but because they are being defensive about their own jobs. They are afraid that they might be replaced by other people. They might be afraid that crime rates would increase in their own countries. They are afraid, and this develops into something we call xenophobia or sometimes racism if it takes them to other extremes. Now, locals, it is only normal for locals to exercise such discrimination, but of course there's always a solution, and what can be done with this is to educate both sides. I mean, I've already mentioned that this can be done either by the social media platform, with the communities, and however they are affected, the problem can be tackled. Thank you.
We have to make more accessible internships subsidized by the EU. And one major problem on that is some firms exploit internships. So we thought that a percentage of internships, a sufficient percentage, after the course of 1 year must be employed. Another bold idea that was introduced in our committee, and it was debated a lot, is that maybe close to retirement employees, when they come close to retirement, they are encouraged by the EU to take personal interns, where the young people can gain experience by their elders, leaving their place. Because, as dear Nelly mentioned, although we might be the youth today, we will be EU tomorrow. More than that, we thought that it is very difficult for a young person nowadays in the EU to be self-entitled and to have responsibility when he or she cannot provide for he or herself. So we came up that we have to make more accessible loans with lower taxation for students that want to pursue higher education and for young people wanting to start their own business.